Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to this channel. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. Please subscribe to this channel, share, like, as well as drop a comment on the comment section. So today we're going to be looking at the concept of election. Concept of election. Now, the importance of election in a democracy can never be gainsaid. This is because election is used to filter the political system and inject new hands in the administration of a country or organization. Now, election, right from time immemorial, human beings have been in one way or the other, you know, order their society. Election is one of the major mechanisms through which societies, have been organized. Okay, since the 17th century, elections have been the usual practice through which modern representative governments, have been, have operated. It is one aspect of political practice that is necessary for a people to make decisions and speak loudly about an individual and for about an individual, a policy, or a political party. Election is used as as reckoning for those who either perform, ready to work, or those who underperformed. Now, election can be defined. Now, let us look at the meaning or the definition of election. Now, election can be defined as a formal decision-making process by which a population chooses an individual, to hold public office. Now, the population in this definition could be, an entire country, a group of people, you know, an organization or an institution who decide to have a leader. The process of electing the leader within a population varies from organization to organization. For instance, the process of election in a country is more broad-based and cumbersome than a small group of people. By extension, the rules and regulations guiding election vary from country to country. How free and fair an election is determined by the extant laws and the level of people's political culture. Okay, so election, okay, is the process of selecting officers or representatives of an organization or a group, by vote of its qualified members. Now, the concept, okay, the concept is actually talking about the fact that voting in an election have to be members that are qualified. Okay, so a qualified member is someone who is loyal and up to date with all the commitments of a group or an organization. There has to be an election, by eligible members before a winner will emerge. Okay, so election is actually a formal process by which the electorate select officials, and determine the issues submitted to him. Okay, it is therefore a procedure for choosing officers or making binding decisions concerning policy by vote of those who by those by vote of those formally qualified to participate. Okay, so now what are the types of elections that we have, in several parts of the world or all over the world? What are the types of elections, that we have? The types of elections are: number one, direct election. Now, a direct election is a process of choosing leaders who govern the people by the people themselves, in which case the electorates go to the polling centers and vote for candidates or political party of their choice. If such candidate scores the highest votes, he will be declared winner depending on the electoral system. The type of election used here is direct because the people actually voted for a candidate who is declared winner by the umpire. Okay, so that is actually for direct election. Now, Number two, indirect election. This is a concept that denotes a system where the political office holders are elected by members, electoral college members, which are themselves elected directly by the people. Now, in this type of election, voters do not actually vote directly, but elect people that will, on their behalf, make the choice of their leaders. Now, this is one of the oldest forms of elections, and it is still in use today in mostly by parliaments in countries that practice representative democracy. There are other organizations that use the indirect election. They include unions, professional bodies, civil society groups, religious groups, fraternity organizations, and all of that. Okay, so that is indirect election. The next one is primary election. Primary election is the type of election that is done within the political party in order to produce a flag bearer. It narrows down a general election to a few candidates so that the electorates are not bogged with numerous persons standing in an election, which makes the entire process cumbersome. Before the general election, the political parties and the convention will narrow down the number of aspirants vying for elective positions to one candidate per position per political party. So this is usually done in a primary election. So the delegates, which may be elected or nominated from various states in the case of presidential election, local governments, in the case of gubernatorial election, and wards in the case of chairmanship election, must be card-carrying members of the political party. Okay, so those are the things. That is primary election. Now, another type of election is runoff election. Runoff election. This is a second election conducted for the two most favored candidates in an election. In other words, when there is no winner with a clear majority in the first election, a second election will be held for the first two contestants with the highest votes to determine the winner. The runoff election allows for a selection between the choices, receiving the largest and second largest number of votes cast in the original balloting. That is a runoff election. Then another type of election is called special election. Now, this is usually referred to in some climes as by-election. Special election is held to fill a position that has become vacant, at a time other than the stipulated period, owing to death, retirement, or resignation. This type of election, however, can also occur when an individual has become ineligible to continue in the office. For example, because of recall, ennoblement, a sufficiently serious criminal conviction, failure to maintain a minimum attendance, bankruptcy, mental incapacity, etc. When an election tribunal or court nullifies an election, a special election will be conducted by the Electoral Commission, to fill that position. So another type of election is called local election. The term local refers to the type of election that is held in the local areas, basically in counties or local councils, wards, and it is also used, to choose a mayor as well. Usually, it does not come at the same time or coincide with this statewide or national election. It varies across jurisdiction. In many countries, political careers are often built from the grassroots because it is believed that those who manage their local areas very well, if given the opportunity, they will do better at the national level. So that is for local election. Another type of election is called general election. Now, when election is held across a country at the same time, a general election is said to have taken place. Again, this varies from country to country depending on what the extant laws allow. In parliamentary system, depending on the electoral laws, the election of all or most of the members of parliament is held on the same day and at the same time in all states. When such election is conducted and the parliament is known, then that will form the electoral college for the election of the prime minister. In a presidential election, both the president and the parliament members are elected at the same time. In some countries, the presidential election parliamentary election, gubernatorial election, and local election are held at the same time. Okay, so that is actually for general election. Another type of election is called referendum. A referendum, which is also known as plebiscite, is an election in which a policy, a section of the constitution, or an entire constitution is subjected to test by electorates to either accept it or reject. The votes of the electorate will eventually determine whether or not the people like such policy or the provision of the constitution. It is used only when a particular issue has generated a lot of controversy and it is heating up the polity. This type of election may result in a new constitution or constitutional amendment. Another type of election is called recall election. Now, recall election, which is also called recall referendum, is a means by which an elected office holder is removed from office, okay, before the expiration of his tenure. Now, recall is usually carried out by the constituents of the public office holder. If the person is no longer accepted by his people, to represent or rule them, they simply petition him by obtaining signatures from a sizable number of his constituents, and they will initiate the process. The election is done at the time agreed by the constituents in the petition signed by them. Eventually, if the embattled candidate fails to win, he steps aside for the next person that will be elected. Okay, so those are the types of election. So generally, election is actually a process in which leaders are chosen. Okay, and it is done by eligible members of the society who actually have the right to vote and be voted for. Now, this process is actually called electoral process. Okay, so the process of actually voting an individual in an election and making sure that leaders emerge is what an election is all about. And there are several types of them which I've already mentioned. Thank you very much.